Okay, thank you. Now let's give a warm welcome to Chris and Debbie Cloud, and they're here today. They're here today to share with us about grassroots activism and effective networking, and they have a fabulous program in Marshall, Virginia, the last Saturday of every month. They sponsor the Patriots Potluck Bonfire, and it started, they'll tell the whole story, but it started a few years ago, and it started small, and now it's grown really large. They have amazing speakers. You bring a folding chair and you bring a covered dish, and you show up, and a lot of folks. How many have been to the bonfire? Here, raise your hand. There's a bunch of folks that have been and enjoyed it immensely. So, but they're going to talk about what they do and how they do it, and let's welcome them.
Before Debbie starts, I want to tell you all. You mentioned earlier at the opening of this about spouses, and. Winston Churchill and Clementine were walking through London one foggy evening, and Clementine drops Winston's arm and scurries across the street, and she starts having an animated conversation with a guy that's sweeping the street. And she pecks him on the cheek and returns back to Winston and takes up his arm and just kind of strolls along, and Winston's like, huh. And she says, "Oh yeah, that was Charlie. Charlie was my first love. We were thick as thieves back in school." And Winston says, "Huh? If you'd have married him, you'd have been a street sweeper's wife." And she says, "Oh no, hon. If I'd have married him, he'd be prime minister." With that, I present you Debbie Cloud.
So how in the world do you follow that? Anyways, I want to start with going back to our opening prayer. And during these times, do we stand on our foundations to rebuild, or do we run? Wherever you go, you take yourself, and that basically is between you and God. Chris and I remember when Trump, we were overseas and we hosted a party, and it was expats and a bunch of islanders, and we didn't think he had a chance in hell to win. And at 9 p.m., glued to the TV, we realized he was. Since that time, all of us have seen so much more about what's going on in our country than we ever knew before. Now, we mentioned earlier that this started in the late 80s, and I take it back that it actually started way before that. My mom was part of the PSYOPs program. She didn't understand it back then, but was a psychoanalyst that did research and focused on a lot of these things. And that shapes where we are today. And we got to remember that who we are today has been generations in coming, where they have manipulated. It is not the natural evolution of man between what God wants us and this division. It truly has been manipulated, and people have been, they understand the world differently. And we have to come from that premise that there are huge gaps in our understanding. We came home when Chris's father died, and we knew that all politics was local. So he said, "Hey, honey, what do you want to do for your birthday?" And I go, "Well, my friend Jill Vogel's running, and she's speaking locally on my birthday. Let's go." That was his introduction to local politics. Fast forward, we are actively involved in our local politics in our community, because wherever we go, we take ourselves. And we fought tooth and nail for Fauquier to win the 2019 election. And as we're sitting there scrolling, looking at the numbers, we realized 2019, we lost Virginia. And that was going to have profound effects on us here. We started meeting weekly, discussing what was coming. There ended up being a 2A wave across the country, but we knew that it wasn't about guns. There was this ideological concern, and this was about our Constitution, this was about our families, and this was about the American values that we hold dear.
There were so much more than just the Second Amendment issues. That I thought that was kind of myopic. It was a huge issue. But that was going to be resolved, and so when the 2A constitutional county thing swept through Virginia, we noticed that we wanted to be involved, but we also wanted to be broader than that.
We saw the emerging threats. We saw people scared with no idea what to do. And we knew we wanted to influence our elections, people engagement, education. So we started a PAC and we named it American Life and Liberty. Well, Chris and I are just two people, and every day we do exactly the same thing. We show up, we know what we're called to do, and we do it. The government has divided that into different organizations and tax filings, etc. We put these people together, and we had a board of supervisor come to us after all the bills that came in 2020 came to the floor, and everybody was fighting about what is going to happen to Virginia. And the board of supervisor told us, people do not understand how our government works. They don't know what crossover day is. They just fought for every bill to get through the House and the Senate, and they don't know they're going to switch sides. So we ended up throwing a huge rally. Within 21 days, we raised just under $20,000. We put 500 people together. Would have been 2,000, but it was 27 degrees out.
It was the last Leap Day, and up until then, February was glorious, and on Leap Day, the 29th, it was 27 degrees. But we still had 500 people show up out in Crockett Park in Fauquier County, which is the front line of the heartland, by the way.
We had 17 speakers. In the morning was all our elected officials to explain what was going to go on with the government. In the afternoon were all the big organizations to talk about what their missions are, what they're doing, and how people can engage, get fight. It was a huge success. Then COVID hit, and everything changed. We were locked in our house, and all of us in the beginning were terrified of what was going to happen. The stories I've heard of plagues and Yellow Jack and all the rest of it, I thought there'd be dead bodies on the street. Whatever you believe, we had people in the government tell us that it was a bioweapon, and with my mother's background, I understood what that meant. We started meeting again in our home every weekend to discuss what were the problems and what we can do.
The places that would normally meet were shut down, and we saw that as cause and effect. You know, the unintended or the intended but unspoken consequence of the COVID shutdowns was to keep people from meeting face to face. To shut down, they were called the publicans originally. You know, they met in the pubs and they had political discussions, and from that came our country.
So we started our speakeasy like in the old days in our house, and we started putting people back together. Finally, they announced on July 4th.
In early June, there was the proclamation that they were going. The government would allow you to have gatherings of up to 8 people for 4th of July, because COVID, And she says, we're sitting on the couch, and she turns to me and says, I'm so fed up with this whole year. I'm done with the year. I want to start over. And I thought for a minute, and I said, they say you can restart your day anytime. If you're having a bad day, just start over, right? And I said, well, why don't we reboot 2020? We just have New Year's Eve 2.0, and we'll start it over, because she thought for a minute. She said, the last day of June, the first day of July, that's 6 months into the year. Why don't we have a cookout and see if anybody wants to come? Does anybody else feel this way? Are they all fed up with the restrictions? And this was in 2020.
So on a Tuesday night before 4th of July, he said we started out small. We did not. We
intended to start out small.
We had 150 people show up with their grandma's best dish, children running in the field. We have, at the time we were living, because we flew home because his father died, and his last request was to take care of his mother. So we were with her, taking care of her on the lake. And we had kids running in the field. People were talking for the first time since COVID started. Late that night.
So I had a bonfire, of course, and as that's dwindling down, somebody turns to us and says, hey, when's the next one? The what? The next one. And so since June of 2020, the last Saturday of every month, we've had the Patriot Potluck Bonfire. And we've had between, thank you, rain or shine, middle of winter, middle of summer. In the winter or in inclement weather, it's an open house. We have people in the house constantly. We've always got guests. But Daryl's our house guest so
right now.
frequently that the dog doesn't even bark when he walks in. But so we have this rain or shine, and the smallest are about 60 people, and the biggest have been up to upwards of 300. Some well-known keynote speakers, but mostly people that are either running for local office or are involved with health or education or COVID information, community events. And the crucial thing, in my estimation, is it's really, really important to get people together. Not on Zoom, not over emails or text messages, but in this scenario, the byproduct of face-to-face meeting is liberty. The ultimate byproduct, and I don't care your differences, I don't care about the demographic differences, the byproduct of this ultimately is liberty. And I maintain that's why they were so tight on shutting things down.
So we are now hosting at the end of this month our 41st bonfire. Imagine throwing a wedding every month.
At your house.
At your house.
So a funny thing about this, something that I wanted to touch on, we're talking about reaching across the aisle and diversity. Our catchphrase has always been, it's a diverse group of like-minded people. Well, during one of these bonfires beforehand, my sister was down visiting, and she's of the other side, extremely. She saw that flyer on the kitchen table, and she scoffed, and she said, "Pfft." I said, well, I kind of drew her out, and I said, well, what's wrong with that? And she said, that's a contradiction in terms. And I said, Kathy, what do you mean? And she says, you can't have a diverse group of like-minded people. Those are opposites. And I said, Kathy, on our back porch, we have people that immigrated from China, from Venezuela, from Cuba, from North Korea, from Vietnam, from Rhodesia, before it was Zimbabwe. We have more diversity on this porch than you know in your entire circle of friends. They are all here because they have a like mind, and that was enlightening to me, because to the left, diversity is melanin, but you better be in lockstep agreement with their ideology. There's no diversity in ideology. It's only in skin color or orientation.
So over the years, we've had this profound change, because we started out first bringing people together to talk about what are the problems, what's going on, and then what can we do about it. Are we going to copy other people? Are we going to try to be a new GOP? Are we going to do this, that, or the other? What it comes down to, of course, there's a lot of fifth grade infighting and a lot of different problems we ran into. And we realized our greatest strength. And our strength was bringing people together and to inspire them. For over 2.5 years now, every single meeting, which is somewhere approximately around 100 to 300, 350, and it's 1/3 new people, 1/3 our close network that we're in communication with all the time, and 1/3 extended network, which comes and goes back home. And our priority is to say, don't come and join us. Take what we're doing to your homes, to your neighborhoods, to your communities. You need to get together with your neighbors, because they do want to divide you.
We don't want a meeting of 550 people or 1,000 people. We want a meeting of 150 to 200 people, with people that go back to Fredericksburg and Richmond and Newport News and Trenton and everywhere
Florida.
else, and they start this in their community, because that's crucial.
So this is an ideological war, and we've been manipulated. Our language, it's like a time of Babel. We can't even communicate with each other, because the history, the knowledge, the understanding that those that we call, quote unquote, the other side, the left, our enemy, whatever we call them, they have a different experience. I was at the polls one day, and yes, I am an election official, and yes, I'm working at the registrar's office for It's 45 days voting season here and on the day of election. But I was asking a Dem, why are you a Dem? And their best response was, because I care. And I looked at him and I said, by assumption, then that means I do not. We truly need to have conversations again and bring our people together, our neighbors. The first thing is we have to get right with God. That's between us and God. We need to get right in our homes or in ourselves with our own well-being. And then within our homes, our network, and then our community. All of us have God-given talents and gifts, and we have things that we can do. What I do is not what Chris does, but we actually work well together, so it's okay. But all of you have gifts. All of you guys have things you can do. You can get your neighbors together, and you can plan things like the settlement project. You can plan things like Heritage Action. You can do things with Freedom Works and all their different organizations that they have. You can start your own, whether it's a Bible study, a book club, getting out to school board meetings. That's the most important thing. So through the evolvement of all of this, we had big meetings, we had action groups, we have strategies. And what we found is putting people together one-on-one inspires God's work. And people actually have God's hands. He is not going to come save us, and he's asking us to step up. So we encourage that absolutely every day. Now it's our job to bring inspiring speakers or truthful speakers that scare the hell out of you, educate you. We don't only do our bonfire, we also have strategy sessions, we have work sessions, we have educational opportunities, we have non-bonfire bonfires.
It's like an off-season election, you know?
We have endless one-on-one meetings, and the biggest thing is our network is putting things together. What I developed over this last year was joining national networks and encouraging what is being learned across the country into my community through myself and the people I know doing the work. So an example is I'm in the Title IX network. And every Wednesday we meet for 1 hour. We have legislature, we have spiritual leaders, religious leaders. We have different organizations come. They
That's
always
at the
have.
Capitol.
It's on the phone every Wednesday. And what they are doing is inspiring organizations with new information. What is working? What can you do? What policy actually goes through? And it's inspiring. So we're now doing that with trafficking. We're doing that already with election integrity. I've been in the network since 2020. We're doing that with family courts. We're doing that with crisis and mental health intervention. We're doing that with our school boards. So the point is, two people with the mission from God can accomplish many things. And through us, all of us can move mountains.
I'm reminded of a favorite scene of a favorite movie was Zorba the Greek, when Nicholas, he encounters the old man. He's like 90, and he's planting I think it was an almond tree. And this old guy's planting this tree, and he says, why are you planting that? You're never going to see it bear fruit. And the old man says to him, he says, I live my life like I'm never going to die. And the scene, the narration is as he walks away, he says, he lives his life like he's never going to die, and I live my life like I'm going to die every day. So planting these seeds, they may come to fruition after my time, but it's crucial to keep this going. This is the best thing that's ever happened to the planet. The United States of America is exceptional, and we've got to do everything we can. We had a guest speaker visit back in the winter, and the question posed to him was, what are we able to do more than voting, but less than shooting? Tactile, tangible, real, active things that we can actually do. And he revisited, and he said, since I was there in February, that's been bothering me so much. So he presented a a grassroots effort that he's going to launch that you may hear about in the future called the Red Swan Project.
And that's by Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer. So he will be back in January, we hear. He likes us.
Very good, thank you.
How did you get started? Did you just invite friends? Did you put
No, literally we went to our local GOP when we lost, because nobody had warned us that we were going to lose Virginia. And we were all standing in the back, a group of us, going, we need to do more. Do you know what they're doing? Do you see what they're going to, have you seen these bills? Do you know what's coming down the pike? And they go, we don't do that. If you want to do it, go out and do it yourself.
But the initial one was a social media posting saying, "Hey, anybody want to have a bonfire?"
No, that was June. I'm talking 2019. That was 2020. So basically, we just got together in a pub and started talking. And from there, after COVID, we said full force, we see government's overreach. And from where I grew up and what I saw as a child, the painting was on the wall. I mean, it was there. The paint was there.
So let's get bonfires going in Maryland and
Right on.
West Virginia and everywhere. How about that? Let's give it a warm round of applause.